Imagine pulling up to a drive-through, right? You lean out your window and you ask the robotic voice on the speaker for like 18,000 cups of water.
Just a completely chaotic thing to do.
Right. It sounds like this ridiculous prank, but in the summer of 2025, that exact move completely crashed a multi-million-dollar corporate automated system in like seconds.
Yeah, just totally took the whole network offline.
Exactly. So today, we're acting as your personal guides through this massive crisis that's unfolding across global corporate infrastructure right now in 2026. The integration of AI, the thing that was supposed to, seamlessly revolutionize the workplace, is failing in a lot of places,
It's actively tearing companies apart.
tearing them apart. But the plot twist here, the real reason this is happening isn't actually a technology problem. It's not a financial hurdle either. It is a fundamental, deeply ingrained psychological flaw in the human brain.
Which is, I mean, it's just an incredible misdiagnosis of the problem across the board.
Yeah.
Every corporate board is looking at the software. They're looking at the large language models when they really should be looking at the cognitive architecture of the people trying to implement them.
Totally. So, to figure out what's really going on, we're looking at a stack of incredibly fascinating sources for today's deep dive. We've got MIT economic viability studies, Gartner corporate stress fracture reports, the behavioral economics of Amos Tversky, and believe it or not, we're even pulling from ancient Greek mythology to make sense of all this.
It's a really eclectic mix, but it all connects perfectly.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this to understand why modern global businesses are failing so spectacularly at this transition right now. We first have to look at how the human brain is fundamentally wired to fail at basic judgment.
Right, and that failure of judgment, it really centers around this cognitive trap that was formalized by psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman back in 1974.
Right. Kahneman, most people know him from the System 1 and System 2 thinking, right?
Yeah. Exactly. The fast, intuitive brain versus the slow, analytical brain. But what happens when you introduce those systems to something called anchoring bias?
Anchoring bias. Okay, what is that exactly?
So this is our tendency to rely entirely too much on the very first piece of information we are offered when making a decision. That first piece of information, it becomes the mental starting line or the anchor.
And the psychophysics behind how this actually works in the brain are just wild.
Yeah.
Tversky and Kahneman did this classic experiment using a literal wheel of fortune.
Yeah, like a game show wheel.
Exactly. They had participants watch this big wheel spin, but what the participants didn't know was that the wheel was completely rigged. It was only ever going to land on the number 10 or the number 65.
Right, totally fixed.
So they spin the wheel, the participant gets the random number, and then the researchers ask them a totally unrelated question. They ask, what percentage of African nations are in the United Nations?
A geopolitical question that has absolutely zero correlation to a game show wheel.
Zero. None at all. But the people who saw the wheel land on 10 provided an average estimate of 25%. And the people who saw it land on 65, they gave an average estimate of 45%.
It's amazing. A completely irrelevant number drastically skewed their perception of reality.
Just because it was the first number they saw.
Yeah, and the mechanism behind this is entirely driven by biological energy conservation. System 1, your fast brain, is basically a metabolic cheapskate.
A metabolic cheapskate, I love that.
It's true. It latches onto that initial anchor because it saves energy, right? It gives you an immediate starting point without having to think. System 2, your analytical brain, is supposed to do the heavy lifting of adjusting away from that anchor until you reach an objective conclusion.
But it gets tired.
Exactly. System 2 fatigues really quickly. It almost never adjusts far enough. It just stops at good enough. And this affects highly trained professionals just as much as anyone else. Like there's this judicial sentencing study.
The dice roll one?
Yes. Experienced legal judges were asked to roll a pair of loaded dice before proposing a prison sentence for a hypothetical crime.
Let me guess. The dice roll literally became the anchor for the prison sentence.
The judges who rolled a low number of 3 proposed an average sentence of 5 months. The judges who rolled a high number, a 9, proposed an average sentence of 8 months.
Wow. Wait, so that's a 60% difference in a human being's freedom.
Driven entirely by a random roll of the dice.
Yeah.
Because the judges' analytical brains literally got tired of adjusting. What's fascinating here is how this translates directly into the modern workplace.
Because they get anchored too.
Right. In global change management, a company's legacy mindset, the way things have always been done, or maybe an initial failed pilot program that becomes the mental anchor.
Their wheel of fortune number.
Exactly. The entire organization's System 1 latches onto the past, And their system 2 is just too exhausted to calculate the realities of the new technology.
It's like house hunting. Like if the very first house you look at is an absolute mansion selling for dirt cheap, every totally normal, fairly priced house you look at after that feels like a massive ripoff.
Yep, you just can't shake that first impression.
You physically cannot unsee that first impossible standard, even when your real estate agent is right there showing you the actual market data.
So now, apply that cognitive trap to an entire C-suite trying to force a new, unproven AI system onto a workforce that is still clinging to the old way of doing things.
Which perfectly explains the sheer chaos of the 2026 corporate landscape we're seeing. I mean, the numbers from these Gartner reports are staggering.
They really are.
54% of C-suite executives are actively reporting that AI is tearing the company apart, 54%. And 79% report that they are struggling with massive strategy gaps. They are reacting with pure System 1 panic.
And out of that panic, we are seeing the rise of what the data calls the AI elite. Because leadership doesn't know how to deploy this technology systemically, 92% of corporate leaders are actively cultivating this very small, isolated class of super users.
So they're just picking favorites, essentially.
Basically, yeah. These are employees who have aggressively embraced the tools and are reportedly 5 times more productive than their peers.
I mean, 5 times more productive is an unbelievable advantage. But that has to create a brutal internal division.
Oh, it's fracturing the culture completely. 60% of executives say they plan to simply lay off the employees who refuse to adapt.
Wow, so it's adapt or die.
It creates a binary, terrifying anchor for the general workforce. Become an elite super user or lose your livelihood.
I struggle to believe this next part, though. The reports claim that 44% of Gen Z employees admit to actively sabotaging their company's AI strategy.
You have a wild statistic.
Hold on. You're telling me almost half of the youngest workforce is risking their careers to intentionally leak sensitive data into public tools? Or, purposefully ignore compliance guidelines just because they're jealous of these super users? That sounds incredibly petty. Is there actual data explaining that motivation, or is it just, frustration?
I know it sounds like pure spite, right? But behavioral economics explains the mechanism perfectly through something called the 3-player ultimatum game.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, in this economic scenario, you have a proposer, a responder, and a third party. Let's translate that to the office.
Yeah.
You have an IT department and a business line proposing resources to a CEO.
Okay, tracking.
When the AI elite get a disproportionate share of the budget, the training, and the prestige, the rest of the workforce, the third party, experiences a phenomenon known as inequity aversion, specifically disadvantage aversion.
Meaning they hate being at a disadvantage.
Exactly. Human beings have a deep-seated evolutionary psychological aversion to having less than others. If the system is visibly rigged to leave them behind, the rational, self-preserving response isn't to try harder in a rigged game.
It's to burn the system down.
Precisely. If the game is rigged, you flip the board.
That's fascinating. But there's another layer to this, right? It's not just a rebellion against the super users, it's a rebellion against the entire management structure itself.
Oh, the traditional hierarchy is completely breaking down. Get this. 80% of Gen Z employees report that they trust AI more than their own human managers for career advice and performance feedback.
Wait, 80%?
Yes. So you have a workforce that trusts the machine more than the boss, but they are simultaneously sabotaging the machine because the boss is using it to threaten their jobs.
That is such a fascinating paradox. But, it makes you wonder why employees and executives are so aggressively anchored to skepticism in the first place. Where did this bad anchor come from?
Well, the sources point out that the initial AI rollouts in 2024 and 2025 created massive negative anchors.
Oh.
Every executive's fast brain latched onto some very public, very embarrassing headlines.
Oh, right. Like McDonald's in the summer of 2025.
A perfect example.
They use a hiring bot named Olivia to automate early-stage hiring. And, it sounded incredibly efficient until researchers realized that to get administrative access to the entire back-end system, all you have to do is guess the password.
And we all know what the password was.
It was literally 123456. Because of that one single human oversight, the personal data of 64 million applicants was exposed.
But see, the nuance is completely lost there. The public perception immediately becomes AI is a massive data liability rather than we really need better password protocols.
Right. The anchor is AI is dangerous, and then you have United Healthcare. They deployed an AI model called NH-Predict to determine post-acute care for Medicare Advantage patients.
Which was a disaster.
It had a 90% error rate on care denials that were later overturned on appeal. 90%. But the truly terrifying mechanism here is that human case managers, actual doctors and nurses, were ordered by management not to deviate from the AI's prediction by more than 1%.
Which shows the organization anchored so heavily to the financial optimization promised by the software that they legally bound their human experts to a failing algorithm.
It's madness. And then, of course, there's the Taco Bell drive-thru incident I mentioned at the top of the show.
18,000 cups of water.
Yeah. They rolled out voice AI, and a customer went viral because they managed to crash the entire store's network by simply pulling up to the speaker and ordering 18,000 cups of water. The bot just couldn't process the edge case. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
When you look at the 123456 password, or the UHC management ban on human overrides, or the Taco Bell water cups, these aren't actually failures of the AI models themselves, are they? They are human implementation and security failures.
And that is the vital distinction. The root cause of the disappointment is rarely the math or the large language model itself. It's flawed human integration.
Right, the setup.
It's a lack of human-in-the-loop oversight and just terrible basic security practices. But because of anchoring bias, the business world sees the 18,000 cups of water, and their System 1 immediately anchors to the belief that the technology is fragile and can't handle the unpredictability of the real world.
Aside from the fear of public embarrassment, there is another massive anchor blinding leadership right now. It's this total economic delusion.
The cost myth.
Yes, there's this pervasive myth that AI is immediately automatically cheaper than human labor.
And the MIT Automation Viability Study, this is by David Otter and Neil Thompson, completely dismantles that myth. They looked at the actual costs of deployment, specifically in computer vision tasks.
Like automated quality control on an assembly line, right?
Exactly. And they found that it is only economically viable to automate 23% of human labor in that sector. For the remaining 77% of tasks, retaining a human worker is actually cheaper.
Wait, 77% of the time, the human is cheaper. That flies in the face of everything the tech sector has been selling us. Why is the human so much cheaper?
Because of the hidden costs of the infrastructure. A human looking at a defect on an assembly line costs roughly, say, $25 an hour.
Right.
But setting up a bespoke camera array, paying data engineers to label the imagery, training a specialized model, and then maintaining the back-end servers, that costs millions of dollars up front.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the server costs.
Yeah, Brian Catanzaro, who is a vice president at NVIDIA, the company making the physical chips that power all of this, he has explicitly stated that AI compute currently costs more than the salaries of the employees using it.
That is wild. MIT also identified something called the expertise paradox, which completely upends how we think about payroll. Can you break down how that mechanism works?
Yeah, it's a fascinating economic twist. So when you automate easy tasks like basic bookkeeping or scheduling, you don't eliminate the department. You leave behind only the complex, high-level edge cases that the machine can't handle.
So the hard stuff is all that's left.
Right. And because the remaining work is so complex, you need high-tier human experts to handle it, which actually drives wages up by 40% for those roles.
And makes them more valuable.
Exactly. On the flip side, if you automate expert tasks, like giving taxi drivers GPS so they no longer have to spend years memorizing a city's street map, you lower the barrier to entry. Suddenly, anyone with a car can do the job, which floods the market with competition and drives wages down by 13%.
So the idea that you just plug in an algorithm and suddenly your payroll drops to zero is a complete fantasy.
Total fantasy. If we connect this to the bigger picture, leaders are entirely anchored to the idea of AI as a cheap, lightweight software, like buying a $20 monthly subscription for your team.
Like paying for Netflix or something.
Exactly. They're completely ignoring the J-curve of adoption. This is not software. It is highly expensive infrastructure. It requires massive upfront capital expenditure CapEx for servers, energy grids, and data management before you ever see a drop of return on investment.
It's like buying a multi-million-dollar luxury sports car to save money on your daily commute because the gas mileage is slightly better.
That is a perfect analogy.
You are so anchored to the one metric that looks good, the gas mileage, that you are totally ignoring the astronomical insurance, the maintenance costs, and the premium fuel that is actively bankrupting you.
So the ultimate question becomes, if we have diagnosed these psychological, cultural, and economic anchors, how does an organization actually break free from them? How do you restructure a company that is deeply entrenched in its own cognitive biases?
Well, to answer that, the sources actually pull us back a couple of thousand years to Greek philosophy.
Of course they do.
Specifically, Plato's allegory of the cave. Socrates describes prisoners chained in a cave facing a blank wall. Behind them is a fire, and objects pass in front of the fire, casting shadows on the wall. For the prisoners, those shadows are the only reality they have ever known.
Those shadows are their anchors.
Exactly.
In a modern corporate setting, the legacy workflows, the outdated spreadsheets, the old approval processes, those are the shadows on the wall. AI represents the blinding sun outside the cave.
The terrifying new reality.
Right. And just like in the allegory, when one digital transformation leader escapes, sees the sun, and comes back down to tell the executives about this amazing new reality, they don't celebrate him. They mock him.
Because they can't comprehend it.
They assume the outside world ruined his eyesight because they are so fiercely anchored to the shadows. We also see this dynamic of Prometheus versus Epimetheus.
Oh, right, the Greek gods.
Yeah, Prometheus literally means foresight, stealing the fire of innovation to build the future. But his brother Epimetheus means hindsight. The vast majority of organizations operate as Epimetheus. They are constantly reacting to the disruptive fire of new technology through the lens of hindsight, trying to apply it to a world that doesn't exist anymore.
So practically speaking, what are the actionable strategies for an organization to stop acting like Epimetheus and actually, de-anchor the enterprise?
Well, the sources outline a few concrete structural methods. First is red teaming, or the consider the opposite strategy.
Red teaming. Like military strategy.
Yeah, exactly like that. Instead of relying on a room full of people just nodding in agreement, you explicitly designate a group of skeptics to actively challenge the leadership's assumptions. You force the brain's analytical system, too, to wake up by mandating the question. If our initial anchor regarding this rollout is totally wrong, what are the specific mechanisms causing it to fail?
I love that. That cuts right through the sycophancy. You literally assign people the job of being the bad guy. What about Socratic seminars?
So Socratic seminars are about building metacognition, literally training your workforce to think about their own thinking.
Metacognition, okay.
You create an environment where an employee can openly say, this automated tool is actually breaking my workflow and making me slower, without management immediately labeling them as a resistant Luddite who needs to be laid off.
You actually listen to the feedback instead of punishing it. The third strategy you mentioned is asymmetric paternalism. Now that sounds incredibly academic. Give me a concrete example of what that actually looks like on, say, a Tuesday morning at the office.
Fair enough. Asymmetric paternalism essentially means creating default systems that gently guide hesitant employees toward better outcomes without restricting the freedom of your power users.
Okay, so gently nudging them.
Right. For example, imagine the IT department rolls out a new AI-driven expense reporting system. Instead of banning the old system and threatening everyone, IT simply makes the new system the default dashboard when you log in.
So it's the first thing they see.
Exactly. The old system is still there, but it's buried 3 clicks deep. You make the right choice, the absolute easiest choice. You guide the hesitant, but the AI elite can still customize their workflows however they want.
You're subtly shifting their starting line, their anchor.
Precisely. And finally, there is structural intervention. Instead of spending tens of millions of dollars on change management consultants who are trying to magically train away the deep-seated survival fears of middle managers, you redraw the reporting lines.
You just change the structure.
You reduce the management layers entirely. You just hire AI-native graduates who don't possess those legacy anchors to begin with because they've used these tools their entire adult lives.
They were born outside the cave, basically.
Exactly. Which brings us to the ideal end state of human-machine interaction. And it's perfectly captured by mathematician Hannah Fry.
I really love this analogy.
It encapsulates exactly how we need to approach this transition. She says the ideal dynamic in a cockpit is a pilot, a computer, and a dog.
A dog.
A dog.
Yeah.
The computer's job is to fly the plane. The pilot's job is to feed the dog.
Yeah.
And the dog's job is to bite the pilot if they try to touch the computer.
That is perfectly humbling. The dog just bites you if you mess with the AI. But, it does make me wonder, aren't we just swapping our old legacy anchors for brand new AI-generated anchors? If the computer is flying the plane and the dog is keeping us away from the controls, aren't we just blindly trusting the machine now? How is that any better than blindly trusting the shadows on the wall?
This raises an important question about certainty, and Hannah Fry addresses it with the concept of the Bayesian update.
Bayes' theorem.
Yes, it's a mathematical way of calculating probability. But in everyday practice, adopting a Bayesian approach means accepting that we will never be 100% certain about the future.
We just have to live with the uncertainty.
Right. Instead of drifting from one static, unmoving anchor to another, whether it's an old human legacy system or a brand new machine output, we use every single new piece of data to constantly update our best guess. We don't blindly trust the algorithm, but we also acknowledge that our own historical biases are deeply flawed. We stay intellectually flexible.
We constantly adjust the anchor based on reality rather than adjusting reality to fit the anchor.
Perfectly said.
So, wrapping all of this up, the transition we are living through right now is not just a software upgrade, it is the great de-anchoring. To survive, companies have to forcefully step out of the cave of legacy thinking. They have to stop treating this technology as cheap labor and start treating it as heavy infrastructure.
Heavy, expensive infrastructure.
And most importantly, they have to manage the deep-seated psychological fears and biases of their workforce rather than just threatening them with layoffs. So what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive right now? Take a hard look at your own professional life. What are the legacy anchors holding you back? What arbitrary numbers or past public failures or, shadows on the wall are secretly dictating the decisions you're making today?
It's a vital reflection. And I'll leave you with a final thought to ponder, building on Hannah Fry's insights. She notes that human beings are naturally far less tolerant of an algorithm's mistakes than they are of their own, even when the human mistakes are vastly larger and more destructive.
We judge the machines so much harsher.
We really do. So ask yourself, how much of your own daily reality, your own confidence, and your expertise is just an unexamined shadow on the cave wall? And when the time inevitably comes to let a better automated system take the controls, will you be willing to let the dog bite you?